What's up, cinephiles? For this episode, we are going to review The Five Bloods, a Netflix movie directed by Spike Lee.
The Five Bloods is the story of four blood brothers. They are war veterans from the Vietnam War, and they heading back to Vietnam to relocate the corpse of their fallen squad leader and also to find a treasure that they've buried back in the day. These veterans are played by Delroy Lindo, Clarke Peters, Norm Lewis, and Isiah Whitlock Jr. Now, as they went back to Vietnam, they will be confronted with the ghosts of their past, and they will have to deal with the lasting effects of the Vietnam War. Phil, why don't you first start off with the thoughts of this movie?
First off, I want to say that I am so glad to see a film about the Vietnam War. I have been fascinated with the Vietnam War ever since watching the likes of Apocalypse Now by Francis Ford Coppola, and to a lesser extent reading the Watchmen novels, because we all know that, as history tells, the Vietnam War has so many issues surrounding it, from what is happening in America to all the atrocities committed by the soldiers in Vietnam. Another thing that's really refreshing for me is this was all about Black Americans that went to war for the United States. We all know the Black Lives Movement that is happening today. It is very relevant to that. All the blacks, they didn't just participate in the Vietnam War. They participated all the way back to World War I, World War II, then again the Vietnam War, and they fought for the freedom of the American people to get the proper rights to their people. Tragically, even though they participated in these wars, when they went home, they really didn't get the hero's welcome that they deserve. And to an extent, it was also mentioned their frustrations about those things happening. Really, Spike Lee was never the kind of director that is very subtle in his filmmaking. His messages are always in your face. He's trying to tell you all the things that he wants to protest about. He really wants to have his point across. And in terms of performances, I have to say, this is a very early Oscar contender performance for Delroy Lindo, who played Paul, one of these war veterans that is suffering from a severe case of PTSD. I really enjoyed this movie.
Yeah, I agree. You know, the timing of this movie couldn't been more perfect now that the Black Lives Matter movement is really on a high. Going back to the Vietnam War, I think I've never seen a film yet that solely focused on the Black veterans until now. It feels resonant in many levels. A lot of themes are tackled. The blacks, issues about PTSD are tackled here. So one way or another, this will be resonant to most of the viewers. Spike Lee, I agree on what you said. This guy really wears his political commentaries on his sleeves, and which is reflected in his movie. The movie started and bookended with footages of news that's happening here, you know, from the time of Martin Luther King to Donald Trump. This is a political film, and Spike Lee lets you know from the get-go. The performance, yes, I agree. He's the most flesh character here, the character Paul, played by Delroy Lindo, especially towards the end. There are moments here he's experiencing hallucination. He's the most distraught character here. Their fallen squad leader, which is played by Chadwick Boseman, who appears in the flashbacks, has taken a toll in his character. And when he does this monologues and the camera is just placed static on his face, it almost feels like he's breaking the fourth wall, and it feels raw. It feels like he's a man on the end of his wits. You know, one can make an argument if this movie could be a best picture material, but one thing's for sure, I think this is an early frontrunner for Delroy Lindo in his performance. There are a lot of themes tackled in this, and to an extent, I felt like Spike Lee is juggling a lot of themes. There's a lot of setup, there's some hilarious banter among these middle-aged men. There are clearly themes of friendship. That event in the Vietnam War had made them blood brothers, so to speak. Family issues, unfinished businesses, which all center back to Vietnam. How one traumatic experience can reflect and transcend into your personal lives down to your children. These are a lot of stuff, and you know, sometimes I felt like Spike Lee is firing in different directions. The pacing could be sluggish, especially in the start of the film where there's a lot of setup involved, but when you really get into the middle, when you're immersed on the jungle, there's certainly a gold mine to be harvested from this picture.
The thing that struck me is the war isn't really over for them. Even for, like what you mentioned, for the descendants of some of these Vietnamese persons, you can still feel that anger about all those atrocities that the soldiers from the war committed against their people, and it carries on to the next generation. There are some scenes in this film that people just keep digging up the past and throwing it into the other person to make them feel bad or to justify what they're about to do. The PTSD for the character of Paul was well realized here, because that's a real thing, you know, PTSD. So many soldiers suffer from it. If I'm going to get into my issues, I absolutely agree with what you just said. Spike Lee, at times, he can be a bit unfocused with his filmmaking. He's trying to put across so many things to the viewers. At times he is trying to service the plot, and then another time he's going to service the message regarding racial injustices committed previously against the African Americans. At times this film really tends to be unfocused because he is just trying to service so many things that he wants to come across. And I can also say that the pacing can be sluggish. It's not really as cleanly made as his other movies, specifically his previous movie, The Black Landsman. That's a really cleanly made movie. That's a bit of nitpicking on our part, because in the end, this movie is a bit of a protest film for Spike Lee, and in that respect, he really delivered what he wants to do, and I really appreciate that, and it really came across perfectly for me.
Good thing you mentioned Black Klansman, because as you've known, I made this a double feature. I am just now being initiated with the works of Spike Lee. I am the fool who thinks that Spike Jonze and Spike Lee are the same person. So apparently they're not. So I am just being initiated with his film. So I made this a double feature, and they have the same theme. So, but structurally, I am more in favor of The Black Klansman, which is nominated, yeah. So there's a more focus here on the narrative and how it really integrates on the real life issues. Though both films are, representing of America's issues in the past and how they remain to be still the troubled issues of the present. I was just reading a section of here on how they did this on the development. This is apparently not an original script by Spike Lee. These are made by two other writers. Then Spike Lee and his co-writer Kevin Wilmot both have worked on Black Klansman. They kind of revisited this script, made it to something that's more relevant. I feel like the issue of the Black Lives Matter is not a major subtext in the first draft. That's why the structure issues become more evident, because they clearly repurpose this. But I'm not complaining, because this is something that we really need today. There are some tonal shifts here. At times, the flashbacks felt like a parody. The movie Tropic Thunder comes into mind, maybe because that's another movie that centers on the Vietnam War, but that was the vibe that I'm getting while seeing those flashbacks. When it gets to the action thriller, it's chaotic, it's messy. It will really raise your heartbeat once you get into those action scenes. I just think that this film could have served better if they stick on a more serious note. The dark humor is well appreciated, but if they focus on a more serious side of it, this would have been more cathartic for me.
With regards to this being repurposed, because you can really feel that while you're watching this. But if I think about it, if they did not repurpose this movie, it wouldn't have the same effect. So even though that it got a bit messy, it didn't really bother me much, because I don't think that this movie would have been as impactful as it is if they didn't do that repurposing. With regards to the action scenes, I don't think that it wasn't really done that well. I'm talking about the flashback action sequences. I think the main reason that the action scenes of the early parts of this movie didn't really work is Spike Lee made a choice of using the same actors in the flashbacks. These characters, since they are old, they really can't move dynamically, but Holy crap, I am glad you mentioned it. When the tension-filled scenes are on screen, it really gets under your skin. It really affects you. My heart was really beating fast.
The first hour of the film, there's a mention thing like, I'm gonna be as big as I can about the relics of Vietnam War, and right there and then you are expecting that that's going to play a role. So when it gets there, it really is terrifying. But I would just like to go back on the flashback that you've said. Maybe this movie doesn't have the budget of The Irishman, but I would have loved to see the age characters because the age difference is very glaring. I just realized this now, why it partly seems like a parody to me, because Chadwick Boseman's character is like this fabled hero. Like, sure, he sells the part, but you know, in terms of the age difference, like, who is this rookie guy who's really preaching to this older man? Like, he's the appointed squad leader, he's a brilliant tactician.
At first, I was so confused when he popped up and he started giving the orders to everyone, and he was like, "You're the youngest one there."
And you know, maybe they could have done more on the way the costume design. The past and the present characters, they don't really seem to have much difference. So yeah, that's a little bit of a technical nitpicking on my part, but when it gets there, the action sequences, the dark humor, the social commentaries, for the most part, it works.
Again, there are many issues in this film, but I don't really do this much. Usually when a film has so many issues, even if it has a great message, I tend to go hard on it because of the times that are happening now and because of the social injustices that is happening not just in America but in the entire world. For this ones, I am willing to let it go. All the structural issues, all the plot issues. Ultimately, Spike Lee made a very, very timely film. That repurposing benefited this film because this movie ended up having a more powerful message to say to everyone, and I think come Oscar season they will give this movie the recognition it deserves. I'm not saying that it will win Best Picture or Best Actor, but it's gonna get some recognition, we are sure of it. And especially it's Spike Lee. Spike Lee is a legend in Hollywood, rightfully so, because this is a really great work from him. I am going to give this film 4.5 out of 5 stars.
It's a little bit early to tell on the Oscar nominations, but if I'm going to pick a movie that's going to be an Oscar contender for the first half of this year, which is a really, really crazy year, The Five Bloods is the worthy contender on the Oscar. It really benefits on its relevance. It's really, really timely. I'm just not sure if it's going to be a timeless material, if this will age well. I'm gonna give this movie a 4 out of 5 stars.
And that's it for our review of The Five Bloods. If you like this video, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel.
Comment down below what you think about this movie, and till then guys, see you on the next one. Bye!